Good evening to one and all. The topic of the lecture is nomenclature of tooth preparation. Is my voice audible? Is it clear without any disturbance? Can Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So the contents of this presentation are definition of tooth preparation, the objectives of tooth preparation, the nomenclature, that means the various terminologies in tooth preparation involved. That will be very important for you to understand the concepts. The topic on steps and stages of tooth preparation will be taken by Dr. Shilpa from week 5 onwards, week 5, week 6 and week 7. So that is the main topic for which this nomenclature forms the basis. So if you miss this lecture, you will not be able to follow the next 3 lectures that will be taken by Dr. Shilpa. So in that way, this topic is very important. And then we will talk about the non-carious tooth defects, the tooth preparation walls, the name, and tooth preparation angles. So these are the contents of the today's presentation. The learning objectives of this lecture includes, at the end of this lecture, the student should be able to identify different types of caries and tooth preparation landmarks. That means you should know the different types based on the number of surfaces involved, based on the site, based on the extent. There are many classifications which I will be discussing about. Then you should be able to name each line angle and point angle. After you do the tooth preparation, you should know the landmarks and you should be able to point out the different parts of the tooth preparation and to know the difference between carious and non-carious defects. There are many defects in the teeth which arise due to infection, bacterial infection, what we call it as dental caries. And there are some defects which are non-carious, that means without any bacterial infection. For example, if the patient meets with an accident or some traumatic injury, the tooth fractures, then we call it as a defect. Similarly, if there is any developmental anomaly, for example, amelogenesis imperfecta, so they are all called non-carious defects. So we will be discussing about that. The definition of the tooth preparation is, it is the mechanical alteration of a defective, injured, diseased tooth such that placement of restorative material re-establishes normal form and function, including aesthetic corrections where indicated. So to explain this definition, I want to divide it into 2 parts. The first part is the mechanical alteration of a defective, injured or diseased tooth. So what do we mean by defective? Defective is by development itself there is some defect, by genetic. If it is injured, that means by traumatic injury or because of bacterial infection, that is your dental caries. Am I audible now? Is it clear? Am I loud now? Okay, thank you. So the defects can be of 3 types. It can be developmental or due to traumatic injury or due to dental caries. Okay, anything for that matter, defect is a defect which we have to treat. Okay, so the placement of restorative material in such defects should re-establish the normal form and function. What do I mean here by form? Form means the shape. The shape is very important for the functioning of the tooth. For example, mastication, smiling, for self-cleansing effect, for all those reasons. So we have to re-establish the original form, what was there before the caries was starting. So the normal form and function has to be replaced, and also, especially in the anteriors, the aesthetic aspect has to be kept in mind. That means, in the anterior teeth, where the patient is smiling and it is in the interaction zone, so the restoration what you give should be tooth color restoration. You cannot afford to give a dark restoration in the anterior teeth. So that's what I mean here by aesthetic corrections were indicated. So I hope you understand the definition of tooth preparation. So we deal with all these things, different types of defects will be restored So for that we need the tooth preparation, and also in that tooth preparation we will be restoring it with a material in such a way that the original shape and function is given back to the tooth. Objectives of tooth preparation. Why do we do tooth preparation? First thing, to remove all defects and provide necessary protection to the pulp. Okay, if it is caries tooth, then you have to remove the soft caries, and if the caries is very deep and close to the pulp, then you have to protect the pulp by giving base or liner, and then followed by the permanent restoration. Similarly, extend the restoration as conservatively as possible. What do I mean by conservative extension? Conservative means you should not unnecessarily remove any enamel or dentin which belongs to the patient. It doesn't belong to you. It is the property of the patient, and we don't have any rights as a dentist to remove it unnecessarily. Here I mean the sound tooth structure. If it is carious, okay, you can remove it. But if it is not carious, do not remove it unnecessarily or without any indication. Right. Then moving on to the third objective, form the tooth preparation so that under the forces of mastication, the tooth or the restoration or both will not fracture. That means after you restore the tooth, when the patient chews or does the mastication, the tooth as well as the restoration both should be strong. Both the restoration and the tooth should not fracture. So in such a way you should do a tooth preparation. Your tooth preparation should help in increasing the strength of the tooth and the restoration in future. And the restoration should be there in the patient's mouth for long duration. It's not like today you do the restoration and tomorrow the restoration fractures and the patient comes back to you complaining that I don't have the restoration in my tooth. So that is not the right way, right? So you have to take care of that. And then finally allow for aesthetic and functional placement of a restorative material, which we have already discussed. We have to take care of the appearance, the smile of the patient. We cannot keep a dark restoration in the anterior teeth. That's what we mean here. And similarly, after you give a restoration, you cannot tell the patient like the restoration is very weak, so don't chew. The patient should be able to chew the food as usual, as before. So you should give a durable, strong restoration. To hold the strong restoration, the tooth preparation should be conducive for that. Then coming on to the definition of dental caries, you all know, by now you would have known what is the definition of dental caries. For those who do not know, I repeat, it is an infectious microbiologic disease. That means it is the damage to the tooth structure caused by microorganism, especially the bacteria, that results in localized dissolution and destruction of the calcified tissues of the teeth. That means the tooth here, that is the enamel and dentin, is calcified. I hope you all know that tooth is made of both organic and inorganic portion. All right. So the dental caries results in I think there is a question in the chat section. I request you to reserve all the questions for the end of the session if we have time. Otherwise, you can reserve it for the next week, because as I have told you already, in the next week it is going to be mostly question and answer session, and the lecture portion will be very minimal. We have planned it in such a way that the National Day week should be little lighter. So you can hold this question for the next. That's my request. Or if it is really important for you to know the answer, you can wait till the end of the lecture. Is that clear? Thank you. So here the localized dissolution of the organic portion takes place because of the bacterial infection, and also the inorganic portion, that is your calcium and phosphorus, the inorganic portion also gets dissolved. So both happens in dental caries, right? And this dental caries can be classified according to the location, incidence, direction, extent, and rate. We will be seeing each one of this in the next slides. So now first let's classify the dental caries based on the location. There are three types. First one is pit and fissures, that means caries occurring on the pit and fissures. Here the occlusal surface of the premolars and molars especially. Then smooth surface caries, that means where there is no defect or no pits and fissures, the surface is smooth but still the patient will be having caries because of the plaque accumulation. So this is the second type, based on the location, the place of a pit and fissure, the place of a smooth surface. Then the third variety is called root surface caries. It happens on the root surface, as you can see here, near the cemento enamel junction. So these are the three different types of caries based on the location. Then based on the incidence, that means whether the caries is occurring for the first time or it is occurring for the second time. That means once you do remove the caries, you do a restoration, and again after few months you see caries in the same area around the restoration margins. So that is called secondary caries. If it happens for the first time, then we call it as primary caries. I think there is nothing much to discuss about it. It's very clear. Secondary or recurrent caries means caries occurring at the junction of the tooth and the restoration for the second time. Primary caries is the first time caries. So let's see the each variety. The first one is pit and fissure caries. Usually in the tooth structure, at the time of development, if you consider the crown of a tooth, okay, if you consider the crown of a tooth at the time of development, the tooth develops in different lobes. For example, in a premolar, there will be a buccal lobe development and a palatal lobe development, which both unite, or in other words, they convalesce. Okay, they join perfectly without any defect. If they join perfectly without any defect at the junction of the two lobes, then we call it as groove if there are two lobes. If there are three lobes, we call it as fossa. I repeat, during the development of the tooth, the junction between the two developmental lobes, if they join smoothly without any defect, then we call it as groove. If the junction of three developmental lobes are good without any defect, then we call it as a fossa. If the junction or the coalescence is imperfect or not good and you see a defect there, then you call it as a pit and fissure. Pit will be appearing instead of fossa in the place of junction of three lobes. Similarly, fissures will be appearing in the place where the two developmental lobes join instead of the groove. So if the convalescence is good, we call it as groove. If it is defective, we call it as fissure. If the convalescence is good, here we call it as fossa. If it is defective, we call it as pits. So as an operative dentist, duty to restore the pits and fissures, not the grooves and fossa. Because grooves and fossa are nicely united. There is no defect. There is no plaque accumulation. So there will not be any caries in future. Whereas the pits and fissures are caries prone areas. There are chances that these areas will be infected by dental caries. Okay, so these areas are our target areas, and that is the location where the caries starts. Now, having understood the pit and fissure caries, let's see how the shape of the caries look like. The the top picture labeled as A is called the pit and fissure caries. Here you see there are two triangles, one in the enamel and there is another one in the dentin. Okay, so the two cones, the triangle or the cones, okay, have the base facing each other. The enamel cone have a base in the DEJ, the dentin cone have a base in the DEJ. So both the bases face each other. So this is the characteristic feature of pit and fissure caries. Whereas in smooth surface caries, if you see the apex of the 1 minute. This point is again the repetition of the previous point what I have told. Initially, I have mentioned about the base. A cone has a base and the apex. So the third point here discusses about the base of the cone which is facing each other. The fourth point is the apex of the cone for the enamel is towards the occlusal surface, whereas the apex of the cone for the dentin is towards the pulp in pit and fissure caries. Next, we will see the smooth surface caries. Here in this case, it is exactly the opposite, where the apex of the enamel caries will be facing the base of the dentin caries. Can you appreciate the difference of the caries cones in pit and fissure and smooth surface caries? Here it is base to base junction, here apex to base junction. So this is what the difference between the two. And usually smooth surface caries occurs because of the plaque accumulation. The final one is the root surface caries. It is commonly seen in old patients because in old patients there will be gingival recession. Any patient for that matter, as the patient grows old, because of plaque accumulation and improper maintenance, there will be gingival recession and the root will be exposed. As we all know that on the root surface there is no enamel covering. If there is gingival recession and the root surface is exposed, okay, means the weaker cementum and dentin is exposed to the oral cavity and it is prone for dental caries, as you can see here. As we all know that the enamel is more mineralized than dentin. So compared to dentin, the enamel is more resistant to caries. In case of root surface caries, because of the gingival recession, because the dentin is exposed to the oral cavity and they are easily affected by caries. Whereas in young patient, this root surface is not exposed to the oral cavity. It is covered by the periodontium. You understand? So that's why we call this root surface caries as senile caries. Senile means old patients, aging. So there is another name called senile caries. It is commonly seen in old patients. Now coming to the classification of caries based on the direction. Okay. When the caries cone in enamel is larger than or at least the same size as that of the dentin. I have the picture for that. I'll show you. You can see here. In forward caries, in forward caries, the caries cone in enamel, the caries cone in enamel will be same as that of the dentin or larger than that. The size of the caries cone in enamel will be same as that of the dentin or larger than that of the dentin. So this is called forward caries. If it is backward caries, that means the caries cone in the dentin will be larger than the enamel. So the caries will progress from the enamel surface, travel along the enamel, reach the dentino-enamel junction, and then they start spreading laterally. So if you see, the size of the caries cone will be larger in dentin compared to that of the enamel. So this is called backward caries. Whereas in forward caries, the caries cone in enamel will be larger. I don't have a picture for forward caries, but it is easy for you to understand. The picture what is shown here is the backward caries. Okay, so the caries cone in dentin is larger than enamel cone in backward caries, whereas in forward caries, the caries cone in enamel is larger than the dentin. Then there is a third variety called residual caries. That means after you do the tooth preparation and excavate all the caries, there will be some amount of caries which will be remaining on the pulpal floor. As you can see in this picture, after the tooth preparation, there is some amount of caries you can see on the right side and left side and also on the pulpal floor. This is the pulp and this is the pulpal floor of the tooth preparation, and you can see some amount of caries left behind. So this is called residual caries. Sometimes during the restoration also you will be leaving behind some caries on the gingival seat. So these are all called residual caries. I hope it is clear so far. Is it clear? Shall I proceed further? Okay, thank you so much. Now coming to the classification of caries based on the extent. That means whether it is just on the surface of the enamel or it has reached deep into the dentin. Okay, if the caries is present just on the surface of the enamel, very superficial, there is no discontinuity in the surface of the enamel. The enamel surface is smooth, but the demineralization has just started. I hope you all know that in dental caries there will be demineralization. That means the calcium and phosphate ions will start coming out of the enamel. That will be the first stage of dental caries. Okay, so in the incipient caries, you will see the surface is smooth. There is no defect at all, but there will be some mineral loss. Some amount of calcium and phosphate ions will be removed. Okay, so this is called incipient caries, or we also call it as white spot lesions. The other name for incipient caries is white spot lesions. Okay. Also, we call it as reversible caries, as the name implies that incipient caries can be corrected, can be treated. Like you have any fever or any infection, you give tablet to the patient, medicine to the patient, and you cure the patient. Something like that. In incipient caries, if you give some remineralizing agents like calcium ions, phosphate ions, fluoride in the form of mouthwash or paste, then you can actually cure the enamel lesion, the incipient lesion. That is the speciality of this lesion. Reversible caries. It is reversible. Okay. This is the first evidence of caries activity in enamel. This is the first stage, beginning of dental caries activity, and it mostly happens on the smooth surface. Okay, and the lesion appears opaque white when the tooth is dried with the three-way syringe. In the Phantom laboratory, when you are doing the class 1 tooth preparation, in addition to the handpiece, there is one more device called three-way syringe where you can blow air and water. So, with the help of the three-way syringe, if you dry the enamel, the white spot lesion will appear as opaque or white in color. That's why we call this incipient caries as white spot lesion. When you apply some water, or if the patient's saliva covers the enamel, this lesion disappears. So the characteristic feature of white spot lesion or incipient lesion is they will be opaque white when the tooth is dry, when the enamel is dry, and they disappear when it is wet. Okay, when you take a probe and check for the smoothness of the enamel, it will be hard, the enamel will be intact without any damage and very smooth to touch. There is no roughness. As I have told you before, the enamel can be remineralized. Okay, occasionally if the patient is having some uh, peculiar dietary habits like taking frequent colas, beverages, or having the habit of chewing shamma or gut chewing, or if the patient is having some food colorants, coloring agent in the food. So because of that, sometimes these white lesions will appear as black or brown in color. That is also acceptable. Still, it is called as incipient caries. Okay. All other points we have discussed already. Then the other variety is cavitated caries, where you have frank cavitation. The enamel is lost, enamel is broken down, the dentin is lost, and you can see a big defect visible clearly for the eyes. The enamel will not be smooth anymore. There will be roughness in the enamel, roughness in the dentin. You can feel for the dentin with the help of the probe. So this is cavitated caries and it cannot be reversed. The only solution for the problem is you have to do restoration. As I have told you before, this is the example for white spot lesions. Sometimes it appears brown in color also. In this picture you see the tooth is dried, you can appreciate the white spot lesion here. When it is wet, the white spot lesion disappears. It is not necessary that it should come only in the smooth surface, that means your buccal surface or proximal surface. It can happen in the pit and fissures also. Then classification of caries based on the rate. It can be either classified as acute caries or chronic caries. Acute means very fast, quickly spreading. As you can see in this patient pictures, the caries is spread in all the teeth so quickly that the patient has lost all the teeth. The first picture is for the school age child. I'm sorry, the first one is for the preschool child, The second one is for the school age child, and the third one is for the adults. So the rampant caries can occur in any age. There is no restriction for the age. We call it as acute when the spread of caries is, it is very quick. It starts in enamel and quickly it reaches the dentin and it affects the pulp. So that is acute caries. The characteristic feature is you can see multiple lesions. That means in many teeth you will see this caries lesion, and the lesion will be soft because it is quickly spreading. The color will be light because there is no time for the food colorants to stain the caries. The caries is spreading so fast, whereas in chronic caries there will be discoloration of the dentin. In acute caries, discoloration will not be visible so clearly because the caries is spreading fast. In no time, the caries will reach the dentin and pulp sometimes. So in chronic caries, we also call it as slow caries or arrested caries. Okay. The chronic caries here, as you can see in this picture, you will see a very wide open cavity. All right. The dentin will be visible. Sometimes the dentin is discolored, brown in color, or sometimes it is black. It depends upon the rate of remineralization. If the patient has a very good buffering capacity, the salivary flow rate is very good. So the minerals from the saliva will remineralize the tooth structure and try to stop the progression of the caries. In such situation, the chronic caries can be called as arrested caries. That means the caries would have started from enamel, it has reached some amount of dentin, superficial layer of the dentin, and it stops there. That is called arrested caries. If it does not stop and still proceeds slowly, then we call it as chronic caries. All right. So the characteristic features will be discoloration will be very obvious. In contrast with the acute caries, where I have told you the discoloration will not be that much significantly visible. Whereas in chronic caries, the discoloration will be obvious. Why? Because there is sufficient time for the food colorants to discolor the dentin. The color from the food what the patient eats will discolor the dentin. There is a lot of time for that discoloration to happen. In acute caries, there is no time, right? And the enamel lesion will be usually brown or black, hard in consistency, and it will be more resistant to caries than unaffected enamel. Whereas in dentin lesion, the lesion will be open. That means it is not a closed cavity, it is an open cavity. Sometimes if you see, the starting point of the caries will be a small dot and it will spread inside laterally, like what we have seen in the case of backward caries. I told you, right? The enamel caries cone is very small. Once the dentino-enamel junction is reached, the caries will start spreading in the lateral direction. So in this situation, the cavity will be a closed cavity, small opening but large caries inside. Whereas in chronic caries, most of the times the dentinal lesion will be open, very wide open, large entrance. All right. Then it will be dark in color, like how you have seen in the enamel caries. The color will be dark, consistency will be hard, and the dentin can be sometimes debridable. That means you can clean and remove it. If the caries is soft, you can remove it sometimes, and sometimes the dentin will be very hard because of the deposition of the minerals. If there is deposition of minerals in the dentin, we call it as sclerotic dentin or ebonnated dentin. All these things you would have studied in dental anatomy, I guess. The structure of dentin, the structure of enamel. I think you would have studied. Am I right? Did you study about the structure of enamel and dentin before in any of the courses? Can you reply in the chat? Did you study about the structure of enamel and dentin before? Okay, thank you so much. So that means you should be knowing what is a sclerotic dentin and eburnetic dentin. Because of the irritation from the bacteria, the pulp will sense that there is going to be some irritation which is coming inside. So it will start depositing the minerals into the dental tubules and try to wall off or seal the ingress of bacteria or the entry of bacteria. So in such situations, you will see sclerotic dentin or eburnated dentin. As I have told you before, this picture is for the acute caries. The right side picture is for the chronic caries. You see, the bacteria is far away from the site of discoloration. So in acute caries, sometimes you have to leave behind the discolored dentin. Why? Because the discolored dentin is not having any bacteria. Okay, sometimes due to enthusiasm as a beginner, as an amateur, you are learning to do tooth preparation. So next year when you deal with the patient, sometimes you see some discoloration in acute caries, you don't have to always remove it. If the consistency is hard, if you feel with a spoon excavator and the dentin is really hard but discolored, you don't have to really remove it. You can just leave it in acute caries. Whereas in chronic caries, the bacteria and the discoloration is very close by. So even though the dentin is very hard, you have to remove the bacteria contaminated discolored dentin. So that's what you understand in this graph. This graph actually depicts the hardness of the dentin as you move from dentinoenamel junction towards the pulp. So in case of acute caries, the hardness of the dentin will be very low near the dentinoenamel junction, and as you move towards the pulp, the hardness increases and then it falls down again. Similarly, it's a different graph for the chronic caries, but you don't have to bother about all those things. The point to be noted here is the distance between the discoloration front and the bacterial front. That's what you should identify here. The clinical implication is in acute caries, you don't have to remove all discolored dentin, whereas in chronic caries, you have to compulsorily remove the discolored dentin. Then coming to two types of caries during caries excavation called as affected and infected dentin. Okay, to explain about this, I should explain you about the different layers of dentin when it is affected by caries. Okay. Um, The bacteria starts from the enamel surface, it reaches the dentino-enamel junction, and then it reaches the pulp. You know this course of action. So now we are just discussing about the dentin caries alone, assuming that enamel is already damaged. Okay, the enamel is already damaged, and we are in the dentin. Okay, in dentin, the caries affected part of the dentin can be divided into two parts. The first one is affected dentin, which is deeper, close to the pulp, whereas the superficial one is called infected dentin. And in the recent textbook, the 7th edition textbook, the Studione's Art and Science of Operative Dentistry textbook, I think Dr. Shilpa has already forwarded the soft copy to all the leaders. So in this textbook, if you see, they call this infected dentin as soft dentin. Why? Because when you check with the spoon excavator, I hope you know what is a spoon excavator. We have discussed in the Phantom Lab. So with the spoon excavator, if you try to scrape the dentin, try to excavate the dentin, there's soft dentin which comes up on the top layer is called infected dentin. The next layer deep inside, which is little hard in consistency, is called affected dentin. So the clinical point to be noted here is you have to remove the infected dentin and leave behind the affected dentin. How do I know which is infected and which is affected? By the consistency. Okay. If the consistency is soft, then it is called as infected dentin and you have to remove it. And the reason why you have to remove it is the soft dentin has bacteria and it is irreversibly damaged collagen. You cannot remineralize this collagen. It is damaged, so you have to remove it. It is not remineralizable, okay, and the consistency is soft. So for all these reasons, you have to remove the infected dentin. Exactly the opposite you see here, so don't remove the affected dentin. Next, coming to the concept called extension for prevention. The topics which we are discussing so far, you might be wondering why there is no connection between one slide and the other slide. Because this lecture topic is wholly about the nomenclature or the terminologies. That means for you to know what are the fundamentals of tooth preparation, first you should know the nomenclature. That means when you want to learn a language, for example, you are learning English, first you should know the alphabets. So this topic is something like alphabets, nomenclature. If you don't know the nomenclature, you cannot follow the next coming lectures. So there will not be any link from between one slide and the other slide, but each slide has its own significance and connection to the future lectures. I hope you got the point. Okay. So there is something called extension for prevention. This concept was introduced by a person called G.V. Black. He is considered as the father of operative dentistry. All right. So this gentleman has introduced a concept called extension for prevention, where you do a tooth preparation. Okay. For example, if there is class 1 caries in the pit and fissure, sometimes not only the pit and fissure which is affected by caries, even the adjacent unaffected pit and fissure caries of, I mean, the unaffected pit and fissures will also be included in the outline, assuming that in future this adjacent pit and fissure will also be affected by caries. So as a precaution, as a preventive measure, so you involve all the pit and fissures on the occlusal surface of a molar. Maybe there will be caries only on the mesial side, but still you will involve the distal portion of the occlusal pit and fissure in your outline form to prevent caries in the future. So this is called extension for prevention. I have already given you the example. Similarly, in the case of class 2 preparation, to keep the buccal and lingual margins in the self-cleansible area, that is your embrasures, you will make the proximal box wide and break the contact. You may not understand this point now. That's okay. When we discuss about the class 2 tooth preparation, probably after 2 or 3 months, you will understand this point later. So just now, it's enough if you remember the point. Even if you don't understand, it's okay. We will see that later. Now, next point is enameloplasty. What is enameloplasty? This is an important step in tooth preparation. In fact, it is not a part of tooth preparation. Sometimes you do this procedure to avoid tooth preparation. For example, if you see in this picture, there is a small pit and fissure. Okay. But the pit and fissure is not involved in the entire enamel. It is just on the superficial one third of the enamel. So in this situation, you take a round burr, round finishing diamond, and try to make it wide and remove the pit and fissure. So that solves the problem. If there is no narrow crevice, then there is not going to be any plaque accumulation. So there is no future caries. So this is the preventive method with minimum removal of enamel and avoiding dental caries in future. For this small defect, it is not sensible to make a class 1 preparation. Not required. Just do some reshaping of the enamel. Okay, just like you do some plastic surgery for the skin, or sometimes you do rhinoplasty for the nose. That means you reshape. So here also you reshape the enamel to remove the defect so that there is no plaque accumulation and no caries. But the criteria for enameloplasty or indication for enameloplasty is it should just involve occlusal one third of the enamel, not more than that. Now coming to the non-carious defects. Have you all heard about these non-carious defects sometime earlier in any of the courses? Can you reply me in the chat section? Abrasion, erosion, attrition. Have you heard of this? Do you know this terminology? Okay. So thank you so much. So aberration means these are defects that happen on the labial surface because of the frictional force between the teeth and the external object. External object here can be the toothbrush. Sometimes it can be the miswak stick, what people use here. So these are the external objects that cause frictional force and result in loss of enamel. So this is aberration. The same loss of tooth structure can occur because of any chemical agents. For example, some patients have the habit of sucking lime. Lime contains citric acid. So this citric acid is known to erode the tooth structure. Similarly, some patients who are suffering from gastritis, they will be having a condition called gastroesophageal reflex. That means when they uh, do the burping, the acid from the stomach will be regurgitated to the oral cavity. So the acid which is reached the oral cavity will dissolve the tooth structure. So this is called erosion. There is one more condition called attrition where the tooth structure of maxillary and the mandibular arch, they rub against each other, and due to the friction the tooth structure will be lost. So this is one type of non-carious defect. So all these three are non-carious, not because of back or dental caries, but because of some other problem there is a defect and we have to do the restoration. There is these are the examples. The first picture here you can see some erosion because of the acid attack. This is also erosion, and this one is for the abrasion because of the toothbrush, both C and D, the picture C and D for abrasion, and this one is for the attrition. You can see the occlusal tooth surface, the incisal edges are all lost because of the bruxism or grinding habit of the patient. Okay, so you can see the occlusal or the incisal tooth structure is completely lost. This is the example for attrition, and in this picture you can see some enamel cracks. That is because of the eccentric forces, biting forces. Just imagine, without dental caries, you can encounter so many defects, everything coming under operative dentistry, and you have to do the treatment. There is one more non-carious defect, what is called as upfraction. When the patient is doing eccentric movement, I hope you know what is centric movement and eccentric movement. Centric movement means the when the patient swallows the saliva and tries to occlude the posteriors. That is called centric position or centric occlusion. When the patient is trying to move the mandible to the right or left, this is called eccentric position. So in eccentric position, because of the force between the upper and lower teeth, the tooth will be bending, or we call it as tooth flexure. The tooth will be bending in the cervical region, and the enamel rods present in the cervical region will start cracking. This portion is the enlargement of the cervical area. What you see here is the enamel, dentin, and the root surface. So in the cervical region, because of the tooth flexure or bending of the tooth, the enamel in the cervical region starts cracking. So this is called abfraction. How do you differentiate abfraction from abrasion? Abrasion will be smooth saucer shaped, whereas abfraction will be like a wedge, like a cut. You can see it is very sharp. There will be a 45-degree angulation of the margin of the tooth structure. It will be a sharp cut like a V-shaped notch. Whereas in abrasion, it is a smooth saucer-shaped lesion. There are other non-carious defects like fracture. It might involve the pulp or it may not involve the pulp. There are some developmental defects like non-hereditary enamel hypoplasia. The example for this is dental fluorosis. Because of high fluoride content in the water, the patient might be having discoloration of the tooth. Or if it is hereditary, it can affect the enamel. Then we call it as amelogenesis imperfecta. If it affects the dentin, we call it as dentinogenesis imperfecta. Okay, now coming to the most important part, which is relevant to your phantom lab exercise. So you have to follow this carefully. So far what we have seen is from the clinical perspective regarding the reasons why we are doing the tooth preparation. Now we are going to see the different aspects of the tooth preparation, which is very useful for you in the lab when you do the practical exercise. Based on the number of surface involved, the tooth preparation can be classified as simple, compound, complex. Simple means involving only one surface, class 1. Compound means involving two surfaces, class 2. Complex means combination of a class 2 cavity and a class 5 cavity. So this is called complex. Similarly, uh, the surfaces can be abbreviated based on the first letter. For example, for occlusal surface, we can use the first letter O. For the mesio-occlusal aspect, if you want to mention a particular region, the mesio-occlusal aspect of a tooth, you can say MO. For example, when you do a class 2 cavity, if which is involving the occlusal surface and the mesial surface, you can call it as mesio-occlusal class 2 cavity, or in other words, you can call it as class 2 MO. If there is class 2 cavity involving mesial, occlusal, and distal, then we call it as MOD, or the mesio-occluso-distal class 2 cavity. See here, instead of mesial, the last L is removed and we just add O here. Mesio-occluso-distal. So that's how it is named. Now coming to the parts of the cavity. You have two types, internal wall and external wall. Okay, what is internal wall? The picture what you see here is a class 1 cavity on the occlusal surface and also a class 5 cavity on the cervical region of the buccal surface. Okay, so a wall of the cavity which is inside the tooth that does not come to the outer surface, so that is internal wall. Okay, so the pulpal floor is an internal wall. Similarly, in class 5 cavity, we call this as an axial wall, which is inside the cavity. It does not come to the outer surface. So the axial wall and the pulpal floor is called as internal wall of the cavity. You can read the definitions here. It is very clear, and I have already explained you. It's up to you to memorize the definition. But the concept is this: the internal wall should be inside the cavity. It will not communicate with the outer surface. Whereas the external wall will communicate with the outer surface. For example, you have a buccal wall, you have a lingual wall. It starts from the pulpal floor and reaches the external surface. So these walls are all external walls. For example, buccal wall, mesial wall, distal wall, and lingual wall in a class 1 cavity. Similarly, if it is a class 2 cavity, then your gingival seat is a external wall because it reaches the external surface. Similarly, in a class 5 cavity, you see this gingival seat. It starts from the dentin and reaches to the external surface. So this is also an external wall. And what about this occlusal wall, gingival seat? All these are external walls. The axial wall is the internal wall. Sometimes the gingival wall is called as a seat, okay, or floor. Sometimes we call it as a seat or floor. Gingival floor, gingival seat, or pulpal floor. Sometimes we call it as pulpal seat. Pulpal seat is very rare, but we frequently call this as a pulpal floor. All right. Now coming to another new terminology called enamel wall and dentin wall. This is very easy for you to understand. For example, in this external wall, the portion of the wall which is in enamel is called enamel wall. The portion which is in dentin is called as dentin wall. It's very easy, not so difficult. Okay. And also sometimes you call it as vertical wall or horizontal wall for communication purpose. And you know what is DEJ and cemento-enamel junction. I don't have to explain. But for the sake of completion, we have added it here. Okay. You see, this is an example of a class 2 cavity. You have different walls. Okay, the pulpal floor and the axial wall are two internal walls, whereas the remaining all walls are external walls. This is the gingival seat what I was talking about, and this is the cement enamel junction. See, the gingival seat is communicating to the external surface, so this is an external wall. I think it's very easy for you to remember and understand. Now coming to a new terminology called tooth preparation angle. This is something interesting and new for you. You have to focus here. Do you want me to continue for another 5-10 minutes and finish now, or you want me to continue in the next week? Because if you finish now, in the next week, just we will take attendance, and if anyone has doubts, we can discuss and wind up. because we just have 6 more slides. If you give me extra 5-10 minutes, I can complete this, and next week you can be relaxed. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Coming to the angles, there are two types. First one is the line angle. The next one is the point angle. Let's see what is a line angle and point angle. A line angle is the junction of two surfaces of different orientation. I'll show you the picture, you will understand. See, in this picture, you have a pulpal floor and you have an axial wall. So these two walls of the cavity, they are internal walls, we know that. So these two internal walls, they join and form a line. Can you see this line? This is the line angle. So when two surfaces of different orientation, that means different position, join, they form a line angle. Okay, this is the line angle. If three surfaces join and form an angle, then we call it as point angle, like a point. You see here, point angle, point angle, point angle, all these are point angles. So this is point angle. So you need three surfaces to form a point angle, whereas you need two surfaces to form a line angle. All right. In line angle again, you have two subdivisions: internal line angle, external line angle. What is internal line angle? It is a line angle whose apex points into the tooth. So in this picture, if you see the axiogingival line angle, the apex of the line angle is pointing towards the pulp, whereas the axiopulpal line angle, the apex of this line angle is facing towards you. That means outside the tooth structure, towards the occlusal surface, isn't it? So this is an external line angle. The apex is facing outside. Just imagine that the line angle is like an arrow. Let me draw and show you here, if you can see. Just imagine this is the line angle. Okay, so the apex of the line angle is towards the occlusal surface, means then we call it as external line angle. If the apex of the line angle is towards the pulp, then we call it as internal line angle. Very simple. And how to name the line angle? It's easy. Just take the name of the surfaces involved. For example, in class 1 cavity, what you are preparing now in the phantom lab, you have a buccal wall. Sometimes buccal is called as facial in the textbook. Don't get confused. Buccal wall and facial wall is the same. So the junction between the facial wall and the pulpal floor is called as facio, not facial, facio pulpal line angle. All right. Similarly, this is lingopulpal line angle, mesiopulpal line angle, distopulpal line angle. Now coming to the point angle. Here three surfaces are involved. So you have to take the name of three surfaces. So let's see this example. Mesiopulpal. That's why it is written as MFP. Mesial wall, facial wall, and pulpal floor all join to form this point angle. So mesio, facio, pulpal. Is it clear? That's how you name the line angles and point angles. Just one extra information I want to give you. In class 1 cavity, okay, in class 1 cavity there are 4 point angles and 8 line angles. Okay, in class 1 cavity there are 4 point angles and 8 line angles. Whereas in class 2 MO, in class 2 MO cavity, that means the picture what you see here is MO cavity, one side, class 2, that means involving the occlusal and mesial bus distal. So class 2 MO cavity, in this you have 6 point angles and 11 line angles. Okay, you have 6 point angles and 11 line angles. Whereas if it is a class 2 MOD cavity, that means mesial and distal both the sides, class 2. In this case, you have 8 point angles and 14 line angles. Just for your remembrance, and extra information. All right, now coming to the one more terminology, very important terminology. Me and Dr. Shilpa will be talking about this in the lab frequently. So you should understand this point very clearly. There is something called KO surface angle and KO surface margin. Okay, what is KO surface angle? KO surface angle is the angle formed between the external unprepared tooth surface, the tooth surface which is not prepared, and the prepared enamel wall of the cavity. So this junction, the line what you see, the outline, what we call it as outline, okay, is formed by the KO surface margin, okay, and this angle is called KO surface angle. You see, they have kept two probe here. One probe is touching the occlusal surface which is not prepared, another probe which is touching the lingual wall, okay, the prepared enamel wall of the cavity and the unprepared enamel surface. So the angle formed between the two is called as, okay, KO surface angle, and the other half of the angle is called as minimal restorative material angle. As you all know that the angle formed in a straight line is 180 degrees. You know that, right? So this angle is KO surface angle, whereas the other part, that means for example if the KO surface angle is 90, then the restorative material angle will also be 90. If the KO surface angle is 80, then the restorative material angle will be 100. I hope you know this mathematics. It's very easy. So the margin is called KO surface margin. The angle is called KO surface angle. Now coming to one more new terminology. This is very easy. Quickly we can go to the next slide. I'll tell you in short. Intracoronal preparation, extracoronal preparation. When you do a preparation inside the tooth without involving any external surface, it is intracoronal, and the cavity will be in the shape of a box. Okay, whereas extracoronal means after you prepare the class 1 or class 2 cavity, you will involve the external surface also to cover the tooth, like for onlays. For those who do not know what is an onlay, we will discuss about this later, but just for now you remember that example for an extracoronal restoration is onlay, example for intracoronal restoration is what you do in the phantom laboratory now. Okay, a box preparation. And you should also know the difference between clinical crown and anatomic crown. Anatomic crown means when you extract the tooth, the place where you have the junction between the enamel and the cementum. So this portion of the crown from the occlusal surface to the cemento-enamel junction is called anatomic crown. That means what you do during your wax carving in dental anatomy. You have occlusal surface and cemento-enamel junction marking. So this is anatomic crown. But in the patient's mouth, you don't see this anatomic crown. You will see only little portion of the anatomic crown. The remaining portion will be covered by the gingiva. So this portion is called clinical crown. That means what you see in the clinic, in the patient's mouth. Clinical crown and anatomic crown. That is the difference. Then coming to the last slide, there are three different types of margins, okay, depending upon the arrangement of the enamel rods. I hope you all know that the enamel is made of enamel rods. Okay, how the enamel rods are arranged will decide the strength of the margin. Why the strength of the margin is important? If the margin is strong, then the tooth is going to be strong and the tooth will not fracture when the patient masticates. For example, in this cavity, you do an amalgam restoration, and if the margin is weak, then the tooth is going to fracture, and there will be plaque accumulation, and there will be secondary caries, second time caries, also called as secondary caries. So, knowing the strength of the enamel margin is very important. So, we have three classifications: strongest enamel, the best, then we have medium strong, strong enamel, we call it as, and we have a weak enamel. How do we differentiate? How do we know? In strongest enamel margin, the full length of the enamel rod will be supported by dentin. Then we call it as strongest enamel. Okay. In addition to the full length of the enamel rods supported by dentin, there should be some short enamel rods, okay, which also should be supported by dentin, but on the towards the wall of the cavity. That's what we mean here. Full length enamel rods supported by dentin and buttressed by short enamel rod. There should be full rods and short rods, both resting on the dentin. So this is what we call it as supported enamel. Okay. If you don't have the short rods, you just have only the full rods, then we call it as strong enamel, medium strength. If the enamel rods are not supported by dentin, for example, in this case, you see the enamel rod is not having any dentin support here. So this is called unsupported enamel. To remove the unsupported enamel, we use enamel hatchet. If you remember in the instruments, we study about enamel hatchet. Okay. So to remove the unsupported enamel, we use enamel hatchet, and the other name for unsupported enamel is called weak enamel. That means enamel rods are not having dentin support. All these points what we have discussed till now, I have taken from this textbook, page number 120 to 124. I recommend you to go through these pages. All right. Some pictures I have taken from the 6th edition also. If you want this textbook, you can contact Dr. Shilpa. She told me that she has already sent to the leaders. If you don't have, you can ask her again. She will send it to you. If you have any doubts, you can ask me now, or you can hold it for the next week. We will be logging in again at the same time. You can ask me. We will discuss about that. And don't forget, next week there is attendance. So you have to make sure that you join the session and give your attendance, followed by doubts and clarifications. So with this, I finish the lecture.